Hey, Chris, thanks for taking some time to talk to me today. Love the background. And yeah, really also not only your background in this video, really excited to talk to you about your actual background. I know you're going to get into it here and I'm going to try to not be too starstruck, but can you tell us a little bit about you, your practice, but really how you got to your practice and who your big client was prior?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. First of all, it's been a pleasure to get to know you and happy to be here and share my story. So, long story short is I started my career directly out of university in sales. I played two D1 sports in college, and everyone told me there, since I do like yapping away, that I should have a very lucrative career in sales. I followed that route. Absolutely hated it right from the start. I didn't want to be cold calling people and hounding people for business with a new technology that no one really understood. And while I was working in the sales role, we had Salesforce at the organization, which I didn't know about until 6 months into my role, which really highlights the whole problem with what that organization was doing. We were working purely based out of Excel spreadsheets, and that was it. So when they brought in a new CCO and she came in and wanted to look at some of the sales data, she asked me if we could go over some of it. And I asked her what spreadsheet she wanted to start with. And I genuinely thought she was going to pass out. And so that was kind of the aha moment where that organization realized that they needed to track things in a system because they did want to get acquired in the next 3 years. And without any sort of backing with data, obviously that's going to be completely impossible. So they hired a Salesforce agency, paid them about 30,000 euros for, a small Norwegian software startup was a pretty significant. And an agency came in, they spent about 2 months with us and they left. And they kept trying to convince us that we needed to be part of like a different sort of sales process and that we needed to adjust our sales process to how Salesforce was built and not vice versa. And so when they left after 2 months, we were like, this doesn't work for us, obviously. And we still weren't using it, right? We went straight back to the Excel spreadsheets. And so the organization was trying to figure out what to do. And me not being happy in my role, anyways, and having an economics degree and a data background, I said, well, what if I can figure out how to use this and maybe I can set it up in a way where we can actually track it from a sales and marketing perspective and then hopefully store that data in this system. So that was my transition into RevOps or sales ops at the time. I taught myself how to use Salesforce the best that I could because I had no experience coding or creating an architecture or anything like that. And then set up Salesforce in the way that we needed it to be, and that was then my transition into that sort of position. From there, I went to a couple different organizations. I worked at Access Data Management in a traditional revenue operations role. And then I went to Dynatrace, also in a traditional revenue operations role that was focused a little bit more on setting up BI systems. So we were using Power BI and then we wanted to use Sigma, which was really that next step for me. I'm like, okay, now that we know how Salesforce works, how can we get our Salesforce to a place where we can actually report on these millions of data rows that are completely freezing HubSpot or Salesforce, apologies, 24/7, right? And while I was there, unfortunately, I got really sick from COVID. I lost about 80 pounds. I was hospitalized. And the company that I was at the time had a 3 month sort of like sick policy. And 3 months and 2 days after I got sick, I was fired. I was let go. So while I was on my journey getting back to health, I got hired for a healthcare startup here in Boston. And they had just purchased HubSpot and were like, this is this new CRM tool that's supposed to be great. Here you go. Please set it up for us. We have nothing in place. And so that was my introduction into HubSpot. Worked with it, loved it compared to Salesforce because I could now do a lot of things without having to code and to wait on feedback from the Salesforce support team or trying to do all this research. And so therefore, I taught myself how to use HubSpot, set that up for the company. I then got recruited by Amazon. So back to a Salesforce shop. And when I went to Amazon, because I wasn't going to say no to them, the healthcare company wanted to keep me on as a part time consultant. They didn't want to backfill my role. We had already built everything out in the year and a half that I was there. And so they were already in conversations about getting acquired. And they didn't want to deal with the headache of someone else coming in and having me able to figure out what was going on and where the data was, et cetera. And so I stayed on as a consultant, got paid a very nice amount. I think it was about 80% of my previous salary to stay on as a consultant. And I basically worked like maybe 5 to 10 hours a week. And at that point, I was like, whoa, there's a lot of money to be made in this consulting space. Really cool. But I'm going to focus on Amazon. I'm going to try to, jump up this corporate ladder and build my career here. Now, from there, there was another healthcare company that I was introduced to from a sales rep at that previous healthcare company, where they just had a friend that was asking them how they were tracking their data, what CRM system they were using, how it was working for them. And when she responded that she loved using HubSpot for her outbound and the sequences that she could use it with, and they asked her if she could explain it a little bit more, she's like, you should just talk to this guy, Chris. So that's how I got introduced to this other healthcare company. I took the call as a favor to a friend of mine, explained to them what I would do in their instance. And then at the end of the call, they asked me how much it would cost for me to do it for them. And I just pulled up a number out of thin air. It was, I think, $14,000. And they just on the call said, okay, sounds good. Let's do it. And that's how all of a sudden I did HubSpot consulting, right? And so I was like, wow, this is great. I really love the fact that my day to day was now different all of a sudden. Like now I have a whole new organization, new sales process, new marketing process, new team members. And so figuring out the puzzle of what their process was like and how I could rebuild that to match that in HubSpot for them was really something that I really geeked out on. And that's the moment when I was like, I want to do this. I don't want to do this traditional RevOps role where I get to build something really cool. And then now every week I'm building the same reports, the same presentations, giving it to people to go talk about it. Let me hand that off to someone else because you don't need me for that anymore. Now it's already built. You just refresh the report, print it out and fill in, the PowerPoint slides. And so when my 1 year hit at Amazon, the day after my 1 year, I gave them my 2 weeks notice and I left. And ever since then, I've been doing this full time. It's been about 3 years now. Never looked back, and I absolutely love what I do.
Amazing. So many questions. One unimportant question. Which two D1 sports did you play?
I did soccer and cycling.
Nice. Nice. I played D3 soccer, so not as cool.
Wait, where did you play?
SUNY New Paltz.
Okay, I played it. So first, I went to school in Kentucky. I got recruited for cycling. They had a really good D1 program there. And then I walked onto that soccer team. And then I went pro in cycling here in the States for a year, burned me out. I quit. And then I transferred to UNH and then I walked onto the soccer.
Nice. Amazing. All right. I can ask you a million questions about that, but let's focus on your consulting. You had a really big client, well-known client. Tell us a little bit about that. Tell us about, what it was like getting that type of exposure and what you learned from it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, long story short, there was a job posting on LinkedIn where someone was looking for a short term HubSpot contractor. I was tagged in it because of someone I worked with at Amazon. I applied to the role and I said, this seems really interesting. And to be completely transparent, did zero background research on who it was for. The role was exactly what I was doing. So I thought, it makes a lot of sense. When I met with the head of HR at the time to do an interview for this company, I was actually asked, have you ever worked for personalities like this before? And I had no idea what she was referencing until she told me to Google who it was. And then when I Googled, I was like, oh, yeah, I've seen videos of this guy come across. So he seems very cool, but I don't really know much about him. Long story short, that 3-month contract was for acquisition.com and Alex Ramosi. I first got there. A lot of the stuff that they had in HubSpot just wasn't automated yet. So the thought process was all there. It's right when he started doing his workshops. And at the time, they were doing a very manual process where if someone bought something, their director of marketing would take that information, enroll them into HubSpot, create the contact, send out the first email automatically. And when I got brought in, they were like, listen, we really want to scale this. We have HubSpot. We don't think we're using it properly. Can you come in and automate this for us so that when someone purchases one of our workshop tickets, we can track what dates they want to come to. We can set up all the welcome emails directly to them. We can make sure we know what tickets they purchased, when they purchased them, all this sort of information. And that 3-month contract actually turned out into almost 2 years where I got to work very closely with both Alex and Layla. Fantastic people, by the way. It was really, really impressive just to be working next to someone that's so known in the space, but also that just really, walks the walk along with doing all the talking he does behind the scenes. I always kind of thought that people that were kind of like public figures just kind of were always talking out of their behind. And he really isn't that kind of use case, right? He actually sits on the marketing meetings with you and tells you exactly what he wants done and how he wants done when they're reviewing all the data. So it was a really cool experience being part of that, being able to build out all the automation for them inside of HubSpot so that now, all the workshops that they do goes through that system that I built where everything's automated, right? You sign up, you get these welcome emails X amount of days before the workshop, you get the survey right after the workshop, the payment links, all of that stuff was all automated so that once you got to the website, filled in the information and got qualified through their sales team, The rest of it was all automated through HubSpot.
That's amazing. And I know you recently or relatively recently broke off from that contract. If you had one takeaway from that time at acquisition.com, what was it? One learning, one trait, I guess. Like what would it be?
I think that the learning I had there goes along with a lot of different organizations that are experiencing high volume growth like they were. They really scaled out their workshops and they had a whole new team by the time I left, and their customer success team grew from one person to nine during that time so they could provide the care that they wanted to. What I noticed there and almost everywhere else is that it's really easy to put band-aid fixes in place, right? So it's really easy to see something that's not working and just say, okay, let's just fix this right now. We'll deal with it later on. And every single time that later on comes, people go, wait, why can't I do this? Or why does this not work this way? And you have to go and say, well, remember when we discussed this 2 months ago, when I said we wanted to do it X, Y, and Z, and we just would feel, figure it out later. This is the pain that you're going to get with it. Right. And especially RevOps, oftentimes that happens where we want to go to market now, we want to do this now, we'll deal with the consequence later, is the biggest pain point you can give someone like me, because we know that if we don't adjust this and track for this information now, we can't report on it in 6 months. Right. And so I personally am always trying to get ahead of that to say, okay, well, let's say now that you have 9 people on your customer success team, wouldn't you want to know where the tickets are coming from? Like, what are the category of the tickets? How long are you spending time on closing them out? How long is, you know, customer success rep A versus customer success rep B focusing on each one of these categories, right? That information is obviously very important when you're scaling a company. But if you don't build that into the automation and into the system, you can't then all of a sudden report on it 6 months down the line. So I think that that's a really big one. And eventually, actually, when they hired the two full-time people that came in to replace me, they actually redid the system that I had already built, because now at this time we had learned so much about that whole workshop flow that we wanted some other things there, but because it wasn't baked in from the start, you can't all of a sudden have it. So that's one thing that you always have to keep in mind is build the systems for where you want them to go, not for where you are right now, and don't just slap a Band-Aid on it because it will hurt you in the long run.
Great takeaway. Amazing takeaway. I've built out CRMs for multiple different companies. And one thing that, a business owner might think is that once you have a CRM, you're going to have all the data. But if you
Yeah.
don't take the time to really, and obviously it never happens as fast as you want it to either. Everybody thinks it's, hey, I buy HubSpot, I buy Salesforce, it should be up and running in a couple weeks. But realistically, it takes, it's such a critical aspect to the business, and it deserves the time and thought that, you kind of just articulated there, which is great. So I got to ask you, Chris, do you use HubSpot for yourself, your own clients? Like, talk to me about that. Any other cool systems or tools that you use?
Yeah, great question. Well, I have to use HubSpot as a HubSpot partner. So you do have to actually purchase the platform, but I would have used it myself anyways because it is my favorite CRM tool out there. That being said, I have worked with many different other ones because I always try to keep myself fair and honest when I recommend tools and systems. So I've used, everyone you can basically think of. Other tools that I usually work with have a lot to do with what my customers work with, right? So a lot of them are data enrichment tools. Think about your Zoom Info, your Clay, your Apollos. A lot of them obviously have to do with meeting recordings, right? Think about Fathom. Think about, well, HubSpot has their own now, which is fantastic. But you think about Fathom. Then you have your meeting links. Once again, HubSpot has their own, but your Calendly, your Firefly. So basically anything that touches the sales process or the revenue process from start to scratch, all those tools all get, funneled through whoever works in RevOps at that moment. So whether it's website hosting, whether it's lead routing, whether it's your calendars, whether it's contracts and invoicing, all those different tools that you can possibly think of, I've probably touched in one way.
Amazing. What are one or two of those that you think work better than the other? Don't say HubSpot this time. Like Fireflies or Fathom or Calendly or whatever. I guess HubSpot has its own, but tell me, any winners out of those from your opinion?
Yeah, I think the two clear winners right now for me were when it comes to data validation and enriching customer based data or contact based data, you are really looking at Clay, right? Clay is the top dog, I think, in that aspect right now. It's really complicated to use. As someone who's pretty technical, I try to do a crash course myself and get myself set up pretty quickly and was like, whoa, okay, it's not that easy as I thought it would be. So that was definitely it's a pain point for sure, and I do see them having issues with that. If someone comes out with something very similar, that's a lot easier to use. So that's one thing to keep in mind. They definitely are very good at validating the data because of the multi-step approach that they have and how they can scrape multiple different databases to get the same result. So they're definitely a clear favorite. Another clear favorite for me is Fathom. I use Fathom myself. It's on every single one of my calls. I love the note taking it does. I love the annotations that it does. And then I power that with my chat GPT that I've set up a certain way. So that now I can take my conversations and it will know if it's a pre-client call where I'm trying to sell myself. And then they're like, great, sounds good. Send over the proposal. I just take the transcript, drop it into my chat, and it knows exactly how I want the proposal written based off the talking points that we had in that conversation. And that really makes a big difference for me as an individual business owner with no employees, because now I don't spend hours building proposals anymore. It literally takes me minutes. And we just had the conversation. I know exactly what we're talking about. And it literally does exactly what I want it to do every single time. It's fantastic.
That's awesome. That's such a good use case. I love that. And that is like one of the biggest it can be a huge time suck from a business owner. The
Absolutely.
loss in sales if you're not getting, you got to strike while the iron's hot. I've got a client of mine who I was just bugging to get a contract, to one of his potential clients earlier
Mhm.
today, and to wait 2 days to send, contract
Absolutely.
to get payment is, that's just 2 days where they can change their mind. So that's great.
Exactly, and especially in this space, right? There's a lot of people that do what I do theoretically, right? There's a lot of agencies, there's a lot of HubSpot partners out there that are great with HubSpot. And so when I have a conversation with you and 45 minutes after that conversation, the proposal's in your inbox, people are like, "Whoa." I'm like, "Yeah, we're efficient, right? That's what you guys want to get to as an organization as well." So all the tools and how, I leverage them in my company, a lot of other people want to leverage them in theirs as well, and they should.
But you got to walk the walk. Okay, when you think about innovation, obviously there's, everything's AI these days. What's an innovation that either you've used personally or you've seen or you're excited about? Talk to me about that. Is there anything like that you're using now that you think was great or that you've got coming up in the future? Tell me. I want to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think the first thing I'll say there is I do see a caveat with all these AI innovations, right? And that's because a lot of them aren't actual innovations. They're just agents built on top of ChatGPT or Gemini that just do what you would want it to do theoretically. And a lot of people are also rushing because they're getting pressured by their board or whatnot. Like, why aren't we putting out an AI tool? And so they'll rush something and bring it to market. And then you're like, this really isn't anything that I can't do myself with chat or with HubSpot's assistant, which is its own AI tool internally now as well. So that's one caveat that I would, highlight is that a lot of people are like, oh, cool AI. And now we're kind of pedaling back because they're like, is it really that different so far? Now, that being said, what I do think is really cool is integrating AI into your CRM system because I worked in sales myself. And when you are working in sales or in marketing and you're selling, the last thing you want to do is after you have a call is to go in and update records, finding the record first, going and updating the field. When realistically, you probably either want to put that proposal out, which used to take you 2 days, or you want to work on the next prospect that you want to work on. Right. And so being able to leverage AI with a note taker on your call that can then automatically update the properties inside the CRM system without you having to do anything based off the information it gathers is next level. Is really, really going to make a lot of data cleaner for a lot of organizations. So you're not just reporting on blank, excuse my language, shit, right? Because that's really what it is. And B, will also give, once again, a lot of people time back. And I think that that's really where AI is going to help a lot of folk is by giving the time back. It's not replacing people, right? Because you do have these sales agents coming out now that automated it. No one wants to talk to them, right? That's realistically, that's what's going to come down to. The second someone calls me and I can tell it's AI, which we all can, whatever tools out there, you can tell, I hang up immediately. I don't want to talk to a robot. If you're trying to sell me and get X amount of business from me, I either want to hear from you directly or I don't want to hear from you at all. Right. So I think that those are the two different paths that AI is taking, but they're taking the time back for people by updating things automatically. So your sales reps don't have to go in and update these things. Fantastic. I think another one is how AI is going to be able to help the creative side, the front end of the actual engine, be a lot more efficient as well. Right. we've seen a lot of people that will go in and then create their emails and draft them and all that stuff. And if you can just give the prompts of the idea of what you're trying to spit out to this, the marketing emails, right? You can just do it that way much, much more efficient.
Yeah, incredible. I mean, I agree with you. I disagree with you on one small point. I think there are some things that can be sold with AI. It's not higher ticket stuff. Like there's kind of some routine stuff that I think can get handled, but yeah, I think the bane of leading a sales team is making sure they fill out the CRM correctly. So if you get something to just do that so you
Mhm.
can have your data, I mean, that would be a huge massive hit. All right, so you're coming into companies, you're changing up probably in some cases a lot of how they do things.
Mhm.
Talk to me about that. Like, what's that like? What kind of challenges do you face? How do you overcome them? Do you even have to deal with it? Do you just set it up and say, hey, ops leader, get your team in line? Like, talk to me about that.
Yeah, great question. I deal with it with every single client, and some of them are much easier to work with than others. And I honestly don't blame either either action plan, right? So some organizations, small organizations, I get brought in, they don't have an ops leader, right? They have someone in marketing, they have someone in sales. They have been kind of doing HubSpot on the side because no one else was there to do it. And so they are super grateful that then someone like me comes in and they say, okay, I've had these 5 ideas, these 10 ideas. Can we please put them in play now that I have someone here that has the skill set and the time to actually do it? There's too many times where a VP of sales or a VP of marketing is now given the task to keep your CRM updated when that's really not what they should be focusing on. And so coming into those organizations, we can make changes really, really quickly by working together with them. And it is fantastic to work with them because they're so happy that you're there. The other aspect is people that have a RevOps leader or they have someone that's been focusing on that and they feel like you're coming in because they're either not doing a good enough job or they just feel like they're not getting the needle moved quick enough or anything like that. And then you have to come in and sometimes convince people why your ideas might be better or might work better for this organization in this case. And then you also can have marketing and sales folk who are then not buying into the whole process, right? They've worked with an agency before, the person came in, they made them fill out all these extra fields that took a bunch of time. And then now, 6 months down the line, they're still don't have clean data. None of it makes sense. And so they're basically just thinking to themselves, "Well, why would I listen to this guy and go through all this trouble again when it's not going to make a difference for me in the long run?" And so that's usually the case with most companies that are a little bit more established or they've been in this process a little bit longer versus your newer startups. And those can be a little bit more challenging because you really have to listen to the frustration and the feedback, right? No one wants to work in a broken system, and you have to understand how frustrating that can be. No one wants to work with another, quote unquote agency or another consultant coming in after the first two or three already failed. And so you basically are starting at a false negative because they've had horrible experiences, and you
Mhm.
really can't blame them for that. And
Yeah.
I've worked with agencies before where I've had great experiences and horrible experiences where I'm like, do you even know what the hell we're doing here and why are you here? Right. And so what I've noticed when it comes to those cases, for all clients, I always try to over communicate because I think it's really important that people can understand why I think a certain way that I do. And then B, always listening and then building off of the feedback is also extremely important. And then explaining why. I think the why is a big question that doesn't get answered to your entry level sales reps or your marketing ops person. They're just kind of told what to do because executive, leadership's making the decision to invest in the platform. But if you can explain to them as, oh, we want to do it this way because then you can report on your campaigns. So, or this is why you want to do it this way in the sales process because now we can look at, okay, where's the bottleneck in these stages, right? Where's the bottleneck in the different deal types that you guys have? Why
Mhm.
is this not closing versus this, right? And when you can really explain to people why you want to do things a certain way, it's much easier to get that buy-in and to remove that friction.
I love that. That's actually, a key way that I manage change management, telling them the why. And then I like to add in like what's in it for them. If you're tracking this data, you're going to be able to close more sales down the road because the marketing is going to be better, whatever it is. But I love it. Well said, well stated, and best of luck in some of those battles to come. I'm sure you might need that. How do you measure success with some of the companies that you work with? Is it you have your project parameters? Is it like revenue increase? Like how do you measure how are you measuring success?
Yeah, so I have a couple different ways that I look at it. So one is I measure my own close rate. So once I get in front of someone and I actually speak with them and learn the challenges that they're facing, and then I pitch myself, I want to know what my close rate is and then why people are not closing with me, right? So why would people pick someone else after they've spoken with me? That's a really big metric for me, not only to make sure that I'm still fair to the market, but also just to make sure that I'm explaining myself correctly and I'm actually, listening to people and providing a solution to their problems. So that's a really big one for me. The second way that I look at success is feedback that I get from customers. I ask people to, fill out the reviews on HubSpot's website in the directory. And also just, I want to make sure that everyone has a good experience, whether, it goes on to, we did a project and now it needs to be a retainer or not. I just want to make sure that people have a good experience with the work that I provide. I really care about the output, and so the most important metric for me is was what you wanted to get accomplished? And were you happy with the process? And that's really all I actually care about. Everything else I think comes along with that. I think is when you focus on your output and the satisfactions of your customers, the rest will follow. So that's the most important one. The first one about like the close rate, that's just more of my own, I guess you could say my own ego and my own understanding.
You have to know your close rate. I mean, that's an important metric to track. All
It's
right,
80,
Chris.
it's 87%, just so you know.
Oh, wow. Sounds like you need to raise some prices, man.
I do need
That's a
to.
little bit too high of a percent for my liking. I'd like to
I just watched a video of Alex today, and he's like, "Yeah, it should be more like 50." He's like, "You should double or triple them." I was like, "Oops."
I was gonna say 60 is a really good one, so maybe I gotta watch more videos from him. Um, all right, all right. Where do you wanna be, a year from now? What's the goal?
Yeah, I think a year from now, what I've noticed is that I have a very unique, I would say, path and skill set that's very different from most HubSpot agencies. And I think that what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus back on me being my own brand where I really get to help people because I like being in the weeds and I don't want to be an agency. I don't want to have a call with someone where I say, yes, I understand your problems and this is how I'm going to solve them. Then to hand it off to a more junior project manager and then you not to get, the satisfaction that you thought you were going to be getting from working with me. So what I'm thinking of doing is going back fully to Veeder Consulting, being high level, a fractional RevOps guy that can come in, make the big changes that you need done. And then once that's done, either help you hire a more junior RevOps person or train someone internally so that they can take over that process. So that's where I want to shift my organization back to because, like I said, I don't want to be an agency. I've tried it, I've gone down that path. I don't want to do it. The second thing that I'm going to do is I think I'm going to focus a couple more um, I'm going to focus on a couple more silos, right? So there's a couple of different industries where I've now worked with multiple customers in that industry where I've seen very similar patterns that they're taking. And so I think that I can build very specific use cases around those industries, like the legal industry, where you guys basically all run the same sort of inbound system where people can come to your websites, they can fill in their stuff. And then they just get routed to what? Your general inbox that one of your interns is supposed to be checking to qualify them and send them through, right? Let's automate all of that kind of stuff. So I think I'll build a couple more silos and maybe spin off a couple of actual agencies that focus purely on that specific industry with then specific industry leaders that have worked in those industries for a while. But that's something to come next year. First,
Y
focus on myself and making sure that I'm providing the best experience.
Clarity, clarity is key when running a business, so that's excellent. I kudos to you. What advice would you have for coaches or consultants who are either just starting out or, a little bit, behind you in their path? Any advice for those folks?
Over communicate. I think that a lot of agencies, consultants, freelancers have just gotten a bad rep because people feel like they're kind of in limbo. And I've done this myself plenty of times as well. I know what I'm working on and I know how long it's going to take and I know what's going on in the back end. That doesn't mean you do. Right. And when you're paying X amount of money for a service and you feel like you don't know what's going on, something's not right there in that equation. And one of my first mentors actually taught me in that role when I reported into him is to always answer questions before they're asked. And so when I started incorporating that into my own business, where I give like a weekly summary email with this is the things that we discussed this week. These are the things that were completed. You can find the results here or the dashboard, the workflow, etc. And these are the next things that are on the docket to be completed in the next week. And I've gotten such good reviews and positive feedback about that from CEOs, from people that are leading, anywhere from your smaller startup to $500 million organizations, to just say, wow, it's so nice that we are hiring someone outside of the organization, but we feel like you're kind of part of the organization because I always know what's going on. And I think that that's the best advice I could give to anyone, is just let people know what's going on so that they're not wondering about it. You can keep them updated. They know where the project stands. And then that way, I think it avoids a lot of friction down the line.
Sensational advice. Love it. All right, Chris, how do people find you if they're interested in just hearing more about you, getting advice, and or hiring you to fix their HubSpots?
I always push everyone to my LinkedIn. The reason for that being is after working with Alex, truly believe that a lot of the value I can provide should just be free. So I like posting a lot of tips and tricks on HubSpot, on RevOps, or anything just on my posts. There's no gateway. You don't have to sign up for anything. It's completely free. So then that way I push everyone there. I don't do any selling through LinkedIn or anything like that. So you can go to my LinkedIn, shoot me a connection request. If you have any questions, happy to answer.
Amazing, man. Thank you for taking some time to chat with me today. I see the sun went down in Boston, so I appreciate it, and have a great rest of your day, and best of luck to you, man.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.